Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. IndyCar is back on track, one weekend after the other. We go from the short speedway at Worldwide Technology Raceway to one of the most picturesque racetracks in the world at Road America. So quite the polar opposite as IndyCar always is. And the good news this week is the timing in the UK was much more reasonable. I think the race started about 6:45 our time, which is much more civilised waters and much more easier to watch instead of trying to stay awake at 5 a.m. watching Carl Kirkwood speak. But that certainly changed. What hasn't changed is the fact we still only have 2 winners, but this time in 9 races. We are well over halfway into the season now, and we still have the same 2 winners as Álex Palou won for the 6th time in 2025 in very different fashion to some of his other victories this season in a chaotic race at Road America. I feel like we've been waiting for a chaotic one at Road America. We haven't really had one in ever at Road America. So there's always a race each year where drivers sort of lose their minds, and this felt like a bit like it, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, I've had that Red Solo Cup song stuck in my head all day today since Palou's win last night, sporting a very striking red livery. Very cool, I must say. And he sung on the radio afterwards, that song. And yeah, it's been in my head ever since. There's all sorts of compilations for that in the background. But it was one of those kind of, I feel like, headache-inducing races, but they're always kind of the most epic, aren't they? And I think it was a real showcase of how great Road America is as well. It's a brilliant track. It's obviously a really cool setting and really punishing as well. And we saw some proper kind of elbows out, aggressive racing. It was a bit of a frenzy, really. And I think it was a return to some of the hard racing that we always speak about, like, this is what makes IndyCar great. And we had 348 on-track passes, only 3 of which were not for position, which is I think the second most ever at Road America, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I just felt like there was jeopardy. We had cautions. We had 5 cautions. Long gone are those days of the early season where we were 3.5 races without a caution. And it was one of those mad ones as well, where it was, I mean, we had at least 3 different strategies. 3 strategies on the podium alone.
That's generous. I think close to about 14.
Probably. You're probably right. Because I think on such a long track, even like pitting a lap or 2 later causes quite a big kind of variation. So that was just mayhem. I mean, it was so hard to make sense of kind of who was where, especially how people got there, which is what we're going to have to try and unpick this episode. I tell you what, I don't envy the strategists. But yeah, these are always kind of, these chaos mayhem races are always kind of the best, I feel. And I think it was a nice race. I think it's been a nice few races just to turn around some of the negativity there was at the start of the season. I think I would say this is no doubt the best race we've had on a road or street course since the hybrid was introduced last year.
Palou, obviously 6 and 9. I think it's the first time since 2011 that a driver has won 6 races.
Willpower on that occasion.
We're at the course of a season, and we're just only over halfway. I don't know. Well, Palou's winning has got to stop at some point because there are still 4 ovals to go, and we know short ovals aren't his strength. So, but I was thinking about this. I said this in my preview. He can actually still sweep every road course race. We've only got Portland and Laguna to go. Laguna is like his best track, and Portland's probably his second best track. So, because at Laguna he won last year. He won in 22 at Laguna. He came third in 23. He came second in 21. So he's never finished lower than third at Laguna. Portland, he won in 21. He won in 23, and he came second last year. So he's actually got he got Mid-Ohio as well. But Mid-Ohio, his record in the last 4 years reads third, second, first, second. So in 2 of the 3 races we've got left, he hasn't finished off the podium at those tracks since he's been with Ganassi. And then the other one, he's won twice and finished second one of the other 2 times. So it's like baffling. Like but you also look at it, Road America is a great track for him. Barber is a great track for him. Indy Road Course is a great track for him. Thermal is a great track. Like, there is no road course where he is perceivedly weak at. So, yeah, ridiculous driver in quite a ridiculous season. I mean, The IndyCar record books aren't ever really representative because we always hear every time someone does something impressive, oh yeah, someone lasted this in 1976, which is a terrible thing about the IndyCar record books, is because the series has been here for so long, it was so strange for so many years that nobody can actually realistically break any records. Poor Palou. He's not that poor, he wins every race. So, yeah, there we go. Another victory for player. I said this, I can't remember when it was, but all his victories seem to be remarkably different. And this was another one because a lot of his victories, he's been the hunter doing in the final stint. He's been the one chasing down cars. Thermal, he was doing that. IMS Road Course, he was doing that. Indy 500, sort of doing that. This time he was the hunted, and he still pulled it off. He pulled out the fuel save, which is ironic because he said he needs to get better at that midweek, but I don't know what else he can do to get better at fuel saving. After Gateway, we thought, okay, there's, Kirkwood's not out of a championship fight. A good weekend at Road America and a Palou poor weekend. Kirkwood did have a good weekend. Suddenly maybe a title fight's back on, but just as those suggestions came up, I think Palou's quickly quashed them, and unless he has an absolute disaster at Iowa, the championship is fully back in his hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's 93 points again now, so we're getting back towards the 100-point mark, and Pato O'Ward is now, I believe, over 100 points back as well. So, is that correct? Because, O'Ward had a pretty shocking weekend.
He must be. So, O'Ward lies a total of 111 points behind.
Yeah, so pretty significant. And then fourth now is Rosenqvist and Dixon, I think, a level there, and they're like 155 back, so that's miles back. But yeah, Palou, as you say, he just wins in every way. And I think that's just a marker of how incredible, how magical he is, and how special what we are seeing is. And in the words of Toby Keith in the Red Solo Cup song, kind of moulding them a bit.
I've never heard this.
Oh, you need to listen to it. But to mould some of the lyrics, Palou he's more than amazing, and he's more than fantastic. And I mean, there was adversity, I feel, at Road America. Lap 1, he was dropped down to 7th, and there was a caution at the end of that lap. And I feel like maybe he was being a bit overcautious. He started on the primary tyres, and actually Barry Wanzer said after the race that they regretted that, and they tried to change so he could start on the alternates, but they were too late. I think they were 5 minutes too late to declare that. But he only had one set of alternate tyres for what turned out to be an alternate tyre red race. And, he'd used them in qualifying to get on the front row, which was a good effort. We'll obviously count to Louis Foster taking pole in a little while. But Palou is such a genius on the primaries, and that he essentially made a black race work in a red race. He was the only driver to only do one stint on alternates, and he still managed to win. But yeah, the second restart, the first restart of the race, he got back up to 4th. He was aided by a bit of a kerfuffle between Power and Kirkwood, which was good fun. A little bit of aggro there. I think they both I think Power kind of will have understood Kirkwood's retaliation. We'll maybe get onto that. But I think it kind of spoke to a wider point that Palou, okay, he might lose positions, but we've seen this time and time again when, say, he's been third in a race waiting to pounce. He just stays really composed, and we speak so much about the kind of measure that he has, and I feel that also includes in terms of, I think we saw a lot of drivers overstepping the mark in terms of aggression and going off track, making mistakes, and leading to some of the chaos that we ended up seeing. But Palou, there were times where he was aggressive. He was hanging on the outside of some really high-speed corners, but he does it all in a really kind of calculated manner, I feel. And yeah, he just, as I said, didn't panic after losing those positions at the start, and it kind of just felt like meticulously made his way back up. And I think the decisive point was under I think it was the 4th caution of the race when Connor Daly ended up in the gravel, and it was only a short caution, but Palou and the 10 team opted to pit him, and Lundgaard stayed out, which promoted Palou to the lead of what had kind of been the favoured strategy in the race. And yeah, that won them the race in the end. There was a period, I think he ran the alternates on the second stint, and he said he got grumpy at Barry Wanzer because he didn't agree with the decision, but there's such a culture of trust there that he still kind of, eventually agreed with the decision. Everything on the strategy ended up working out, and yeah, just capitalized on others' over aggression in that early part of the race, and then just did a really Palou job in the second half, I feel like, to pull out a massive gap on his own strategy. And then he was sat behind Dixon in those closing laps, probably helping him save some of the fuel that he needed to save. But Palou is just so remarkable in those kind of management situations that he'd saved enough fuel again. It was a bit like the 500 where you could just push on the final lap, even though you had Felix Rosenqvist on absolutely no saving and all that attack strategy behind. Palou was still able to push on that final lap and finished over 2 seconds ahead, even with Rosenqvist, I think, logging the fastest lap of the race on that final lap. I know people will say, and we've had this conversation so much, boring, same old winner, what have you. But you've got to just sit down, stand up, whatever you want to do, and appreciate what we're seeing, because this is incredible.
We do still need a different winner, though. I think we're going to struggle with episode titles if Palou keeps on winning at this rate. I think that's the biggest downside, is we're running out of episode titles to put Palou's name in because he keeps on winning it. Kirkwood is also, we're getting close to danger as well. So if we get past Iowa and they still won every race, genuinely, I think I might just, I don't know, we'll think of a bet later on the episode if Palou and Kirkwood have still on that winning streak past Iowa. So unfortunately, we couldn't catch up with the man post-race. However, we did catch up with Álex earlier on in the week, and some of his comments aged quite well when you reflect post-race at Road America. So I'm going to leave it to Álex to reflect on a few different topics that we posed to him. Chip Ganassi said right at the start of the season that he feels like you're only getting better and better. So is that something you feel the same from your perspective? And if so, what do you think you still need to improve on?
Yeah, I would say that you always, it's the beauty of the sport that you can always get better at everything. You can always get better at going a little bit faster, getting more speed, at just like saving better the tires, saving more fuel, like managing better how you are aggressive in defending or overtaking. Like there's so much stuff that you can always be a little bit better, that I think there's no limit. And you can see that in amazing drivers like Dixon, Power, like these guys that've been around for so long. And I think Power said the other past weekend that he's been driving the best that he's ever done it. So I believe in that, and I think that it's the beauty of motorsport, that you can always keep on pushing yourself to try and be a little bit better. So where do I think I can get better? Well, everything, like a little bit faster, hopefully better on short ovals, better on qualifying up front and defending moves or overtaking. So I think there's always stuff that you can improve on.
That's quite terrifying for your position, to be completely honest, with your form. But we've seen Carl Kirkwood in a good run of form recently, and he's cut the points deficit to you quite significantly. Pato Ward's obviously gained a few points on you as well. So do you feel any more pressure for the championship than you did after the Indy 500? And does that change the mentality at all coming into each race?
No, like I said it before the 500 and after the 500 that the same way we won like 4 or 5 races in like a very short period of time, there could be somebody else to do the same, because it's not impossible. We've done it, so somebody else can do it as well. And we're seeing that with Kyle. I think obviously without his penalty at the 500, he would be even a lot closer. So yeah, it didn't add any pressure at all, just because I did never think that it was done or that it was ours or anything like that. I knew that we just had the perfect start of the season, and obviously you could see a big point difference. But yeah, I expect that it's gonna get very tight. It's gonna get interesting, and I just hope that we are there at the end to fight for it.
And you're still relatively early into your career. You've won 3 championships. You won an Indy 500, which is what every IndyCar driver dreams of. So at this point, what do you still want to achieve in your career? What aspirations do you still have now you've got both those boxes ticked?
So I've never had like a goal of like getting an X amount of wins or championships or Indy 500s. My goal has always been to first be able to race and be able to race at the highest level with a great team, and then to win every single weekend. Like that's what I like. It's the feeling that I like the most. It's not when the season is over and you kind of get the trophy and photos and all that stuff. What I like, it's going to every single weekend, fighting for the race, having fun, getting the car a little bit better, getting myself a little bit better. So yeah, what else can I achieve? Like win this weekend, and then the following one. Like that's what we can still achieve, and keep on counting on those wins, and hopefully when we look back in a long time from now, we can maybe count those wins and those championships and Indy 500s.
I think we probably should touch on Palou's title in very, very inverted commas contenders. I still don't think they were ever contenders. They were just trying to push some narrative. It was like Norris versus Verstappen F1 last year, and Norris was never really a contender, but the narrative was that he was. And Kirk was,
yeah, I mean, Palou kind of pushed it himself in midweek. He said like he feels like there's still a very tight battle, and I don't know.
You've never heard Palou say he's comfortable when he's going to win the championship.
I think that's something again that's so great. Is his mentality is brilliant. Like he always speaks about taking it race by race, enjoying all of the success while he has it, which I think is really important because some sports people generally they're so hyper focused on the next thing they don't soak it in, and I guess that kind of saps a bit of the enjoyment out of it. And Palou seems to just enjoy his craft so much, and he also doesn't get complacent, which I think is the good thing.
But all round, it was a pretty good weekend for Kirkwood. I think he qualified third, which was pretty good, and he ran well all day. His only real saga was with Will Power, which we've never really seen Kirkwood get grumpy at people through on-track actions. But Power was obviously trying to overtake Palou, completely outbraked himself, so ended up getting Kirkwood at the same time. He
was out of control. I mean, and I think he will have known that. He wasn't trying to overtake Kirkwood.
He did. Kirkwood did well to see Power coming, and then there was a move later on in the race, ironically with Palou behind, where Power went off at the kink. I think he lost out to Newgarden, and then Kirkwood. The move wasn't really on, but he wanted to get his own back at Power, just drove him completely off the road.
Bit of wheel banging, good old fashioned wheel banging.
And then let Palou pass both of them, which was a pretty amusing saga. It's something very reminiscent of Power, but not very reminiscent of Kirkwood. Is the funny thing.
Kirkwood was unhappy. Like I think there was a caution pretty immediately after Power had made that dive bomb that wasn't supposed to be a dive bomb. He pulled up alongside him and kind of didn't give him any like rude gestures, but kind of just raised his hand to him, which I think was fair. I mean, they both asked for penalties for each other, and I don't know, maybe, but it's just that's hard racing and the nature of these tracks. Yeah, on the 27 side, I feel like we're seeing a level of execution, even with Herta finishing as he did in the championship last year, that we haven't seen for years, and they're just not putting a foot wrong. Whether that's strategy, pit stops, how Kirkwood is just executing and getting the most out of every weekend. And we've spoken obviously about him, having the peak performance of that first year with Andretti, the consistency of last year without those peaks, and how this year he's had the peaks and had them more frequently, but also the results where he doesn't win. He's finishing fourth. He's inside the top five, and it's the stuff of champions. And any other year, if it wasn't Palou having this absurd season, you would be hailing Kirkwood as having a super, super impressive season. And I'm just really impressed with him. His development has been, and I know we probably spoke a lot about this after Gateway, and you can go and listen back to that for wider kind of analysis on Kirkwood, but he's becoming so complete, and his development, his rate of development has been, I'm just really impressed.
It's quite interesting because now in the standings, there is actually quite a gap from Pato O'Ward to Felix Rosenqvist to 44 points. So Palou's obviously got a giant gap to Kirkwood. Kirkwood and O'Ward are on pretty similar terms. I don't really know how, because Kirkwood and O'Ward feels like have had vastly different seasons. And then there's a big, big gap to Rosenqvist, Dix and Lundgaard, are all sort of the same area. And then it really drops off from there. So again, weird championship order. I don't really know how O'Ward is still so high in the standings, but we'll analyse it next week.
I mean, this was his worst weekend of the season, and he finished, was it 17th? So that was his worst result of the season, which maybe, I guess, speaks a bit to that. Obviously, Kirkwood had the 500, getting minimum points there, as we've spoken about with the disqualification that wasn't a disqualification completely. But maybe the fact that O'Ward's best worst finishes.
But I don't really understand what happened with O'Ward, because he was on the Dixon strategy for ages, and then he just seemed to drop like a fly towards the end. Like, he was losing a position in every single straight. I know he said he had an issue in qualifying, which lost him half a second on the straight. And then he was one of the ones who pulled up on the exit of pit road on the cooldown lap, but he pitted, or he should have pitted, way later than everybody else if he was on the same strategy as Dixon, which he was for the majority of the race. So I'm pretty sure he pitted with 14 to go in his final stop, but it's just a weird strategy that the number 5 stand took, which meant he was on a really bizarre fuel save, which he didn't really feel like he needed to be on. So he ended up 17th, which is pretty poor.
I didn't really understand Lundgaard's strategy. I know, okay, he was ahead of Rosenqvist, and it may have worked out before he spun, trying just an unnecessarily bold and aggressive move around the outside of Canada corner on Herta that just saw him, just lose it and then snap again across the track. And that was another thing with Kirkwood, actually. He only narrowly avoided that one as well. So that was a mistake from Lundgaard. And okay, maybe he would have been there challenging Palou because he was ahead of Rosenqvist, and obviously Rosenqvist only finished 2 seconds behind Palou. But at the same time, and okay, maybe with the caveat that Lundgaard couldn't have saved fuel in the way that Palou did, I just felt like it was an unnecessary gamble not to stop under that 4th caution and hang it out a bit longer. And I know obviously it put them on an attacking strategy rather than kind of the quote-unquote defensive strategy of Palou having to fuel save. But Lundgaard was ahead of Palou at that time, and you would have expected he probably could have stayed ahead of Palou and maybe even would have been in a position to be ahead of Dixon because he was having a great race. So I feel like they just took an unnecessary gamble on the Lundgaard side, and it could well have worked out if he didn't make his mistake, but I felt like it was a bit of an unnecessary risk from a very good position. I'm not sure.
Even Siegel was on a bit of a bizarre one. I mean, he made 5 pit stops, which was 2 more than some of the people around him.
So I saw this reported by Trackside Online. He had an extra pit stop in the middle of the race. He was sent out with an alternate right rear tyre.
I heard this. How does that happen?
I have no idea, but again, this is a sort of thing like Aaron McLaren have got to cut this out because we're getting to Penske's disaster. But I almost feel like AJ Foyt Racing have been the best Chevy team this year.
Yeah, there's an argument.
Well,
there's a lot of recency bias in that, isn't there?
And since May, there's quite a big big asterisk there. But they are emerging as that almost. I feel like because Aaron McLaren seems to just be having disasters. But should we just cover them off while we're speaking about them?
I think we've done overall. We've done Lundgaard. Siegel finished 8th, which is his best ever on a road street, I believe. He got 9th in Barber earlier this year, so I think that's the best ever road street on a bit of a bizarre strategy. And obviously, it came under a lot of criticism the last couple of weeks. So much cleaner race for Siegel, and I think he said needed this result. Remains 20th in the standings, though. But one of those races again. I said this like the last 2 weeks, where if you sort of just got on the right strategy and didn't have a monster fuel save, you'd actually probably pick up a decent result, which we saw for people like Siegel, people like Simpson, people like Armstrong, people like Malukas, for example, people like VK. And Siegel was certainly one of them. But it's a result where you feel like it might boost up his confidence, qualified pretty decently again. So, yeah, I guess Siegel's come under a bit of pressure last couple of weeks. So, just a good result. I don't think he drove excellently to get PA. He obviously drove well, but just one of those small little confidence boosting things.
Yeah, it was one of those. You had to catch a yellow at the right time. Like Kevin Simpson obviously ended up 6th, but don't take anything away from him. I mean, he gained 17 positions from his starting spot, but then you also have like Scott McLaughlin, who looked like
that 8th stand, by the way, has had some outstanding strategy calls this year. This must be the 3rd or 4th time they've just got him.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I think on that, it's probably evidence as well of, having more focused personnel and the highest quality personnel having cut obviously down from 5 to 3 cars. But yeah, you had to catch yellows at the right time. And McLaughlin was in the lead fight for most of the race, and he ended up down in 12th because he got hosed by a yellow, I think. But he's obviously got a lot of attention also for his radio in the last week, where he had a bit of a fiery radio and criticising Penske. This was after he got penalised for blocking McLaughlin on the backstretch at Gateway. But I think just to touch on that briefly, because this hadn't come to light last week. I think it's been blown way out of proportion. Like, it's heat of the moment, it's adrenaline, it's passion. These drivers are going at 200 miles per hour. You're going to be passionate, but I almost feel like the statements and stuff brought more attention to it. And yeah, think about the amount of fiery messages we get from like Will Power. It's just the heat of the battle, and it's not like he said anything offensive. Like, frustration brimmed over. It happens. I think it's ignorant of people to call Siegel immature, which I think was a word that loads of people ended up using. I feel like he's a guy, for someone in his early 20s, that's way beyond his years in terms of maturity. And anyone who doesn't believe that doesn't really know the affable Nolan Siegel that we have kind of been exposed to. And, he spoke to McLaughlin, he apologized, they moved on. I think it was just a big non-issue. I like to see that sort of passion anyway. And then just a final point as well, kind of interesting after all the kerfuffles with Siegel and Penske in recent weeks. He's got Kyle Moyer, who was Scott McLaughlin's strategist, one of those fired in May by Team Penske, coming in as his strategist from Mid-Ohio. So the start of these high-profile Penske execs that were fired and lost their jobs in the wake of the qualifying illegalities saga. First one with a job, and that is Kyle Moyer, Aaron McLaren, rekindling with Tony Kanaan, who he's got a pretty good relationship with. So that's a big deal.
We'll touch on Penske's disaster, which is becoming a regular theme of this podcast. Let's touch on Penske's disaster this week. What happened to Team Penske? We'll start off with the two. Joseph Newgarden, we say every week how horrific a season has been. It really does not get any better. Again, the one weekend where, podium might be in cards, top 5, maybe worst case, or top 10, ends up with another very uncharacteristic Newgarden. I say Newgarden really hasn't made many mistakes. He's had more bad luck than he's made mistakes, but this one really truly was a mistake, and he just completely dropped it out the exit at turn 14. And this was about midway during the race. So, yeah, Newgarden hasn't had a good season. He's had his fair share of bad luck. We saw that in Gateway. We saw that at the Indy 500. We saw it at Long Beach. But this was an error all by himself, and this was a track you felt like where he could really bounce back. And he now lies 17th in the standings. He's behind Kiffin Simpson. He's behind Christian Rasmussen. He's behind Venus VK in the standings. So, yeah, it's you feel like at some point the season will be turned around for Newgarden. This is Penske's worst start to the season since 2021. They won at, wins-wise. They won at Mid-Ohio, which is the next race that we go to. But, yeah, it doesn't really get any better for Newgarden. It remains about top 8 since the season opener in St. Petersburg. And I don't know. Every year, Newgarden seems to go with this new mentality, this new mindset, but it's just not working. And I know he's signed a long-term deal with Penske, so him leaving the team isn't on the table. But you feel like something needs to change. Is this just a abysmal lack of form with terrible run, or is there something wider to this?
I mean, it feels like this season, and then looking further back, really, since he finished second to Power in 22, that kind of bout of second place finishes that he'd had, it kind of just feels like he's been in a tailspin since then. Obviously, he maybe finished 5th, did he, in 23, which wasn't bad. And then last year was really poor. And this year, and I was going to make that same point you made, that he comes in with this really positive front, and he's a new guy again, and he's refreshed, and genuinely, I bought that, and he looked really positive. And yeah, it's been a catastrophe. I had him in the top few positions in the championship in my preseason predictions. I felt so confident he was going to rebound.
He's got that reputation,
and as we said, like he was like just finished in the top 2 for a ridiculous streak, maybe since he won the championship.
It was 3 seasons in a row.
Yeah, and then obviously I think he won the championship in
2019.
He won it in 2017, didn't finish second in 18, won the championship again in 19, and then had the 3 successive seconds. So he was a formidable force, but that's kind of just seems to have waned. And obviously, yes, Penske have had so much bad luck this season, and I feel like they have not executed on a team-wide level and at the Penske perfect standard that we are used to, but that also extends to the drivers. And yeah, Newgarden, I don't know. Like he's not really got that much pace. He's
not qualifying well.
I mean, I liked like throughout the 500 and throughout May, he was really positive and kind of just like whatever happens will kind of happen. I sense now maybe there is a bit of agitation. There's got to be agitation. He's 249 points behind the championship lead after 9 races. Like that's nearly That's the best part of 5 races. Like, about half of what we've done so far this season, he could have sat out and Palou would still be beating him. Or Palou could have sat out half of it and would still be beating Newgarden. I mean, it's amazing. But yeah, I mean, as you say, there's been a lot of bad luck there. And I mean, I think the 2 or 3 lap stretch in which Willpower spun Canada corner and then Newgarden crashed a couple of laps later basically just summed up the nightmare year. And McLaughlin in the midst of that kind of being in win contention.
Again, this felt like a McLaughlin weekend where he could turn it around. But...
He was one that did get screwed by yellow, strategy. I think he said. So again, there's that strategy thing. Is it a misfortune thing? Maybe a mix of both. And it's kind of, just everything that's been going wrong for Penske this season. And this wasn't like a Gateway where it was they simply were really unlucky. This weekend kind of had lack of execution in places, really promising pace. I mean, there was points where they were all running in the top 4 of the lead strategy, and that promise there's just nothing delivered on it because of misfortune, because of errors, because of poor execution. It was just a microcosm of a real the bigger picture of the season really. And Power couldn't recover after he spun. He finished down in, I want to say 14th. Yeah, he finished down in 14th. McLaughlin obviously 12th, and then Newgarden, wrecking that left rear corner of his car and the rear wing as well. And it's been catastrophic. I mean, this is going to be Newgarden's worst season away from his rookie year, and you've got to hope for his sake that maybe the ovals coming up, likes of Iowa, can be a launch pad. Because I mean, Gateway, he was probably going to win that race. Even the 500, he was going to win that race as well if it was not for his, or I can't say it with that much confidence, but he was a very good bet to win if it wasn't for the car failure that happened there. So it's got to get better at some point, you must think. But I mean, it seemed like Road America was going to be that. It felt like his best run of the season, really, at least since St. Pete on a road or street course. And obviously what happened. And turn 14 was a trouble corner, but you don't expect someone of Newgarden's caliber and experience to be making that sort of mistake in the race. No chance.
Let's give some credit to Felix Racing, Chris. He's come second.
How have we got this far? Yeah.
I said to you, I just cannot believe this is Rosenqvist's first podium Marshak Racing. It feels like he should have had about 8.
That's testament to the job he's done since joining. He's been transformative.
And he was the attacker. He was the hunter. He obviously won this race in 2020 in a very similar circumstances when chasing down Pato Award. Didn't quite have it for Álex Palou, but Felix Rosenqvist seemed to still pretty happy with the outcome. And he jumps up to 4th in the standings, which is unsurprising, which says quite a lot. It feels rather deserved. He's had a good season. It's his 4th time has been inside the top 5 of the season for Felix Rosenqvist. It's the 6th time inside the top 10. So a good result for Ferrari and a long deserved podium for Marshak. So well done, Felix Rosenqvist.
Yeah, I mean, it was 22 on the first race in the Indy Road Course. So over 3 years ago that Simon Pagenaud finished second for the team, second to Colton Herster on that day. And that was the last time they'd been on a podium. Obviously, thermal, the exhibition, what have you, that doesn't count. But that was during that real hot streak at the start of last year. But after that kind of Pagenaud podium, they just really tailed off. Obviously, 23 was disastrous. Only 2 top 10 qualifying results and 1 top 10 race result. And Rosenqvist comes in and immediately delivers in 24 with a couple of front rows, including the first pole for the team, and 5 top 10s in the first 6 races. And then for the remainder of the season, then they kind of were just hit with so much misfortune. He still finished 12th in the standings, but only had that 1 top 10, and it kind of felt like he was following a similar pattern. And we'll play in what Rosenqvist had to say about this in a moment. But he started this season with 5 top 10s in 6 races, and then had obviously the Louis Foster's suspension failure careered into him in Detroit for that DNF, and Gateway was just poor, finished outside the top 10. So this quelled any kind of talk of, obviously having another tail off. And I feel like his leadership has just really transformed things at Marshak Racing. And, obviously he'd kind of been, he'd been at Chip Ganassi Racing where he's twice finished in the top 10 in the standings. This is, if he finishes 4th, it will be his career best. He was 6th as a rookie for Ganassi, and then kind of never really reproduced that. He was 8th in 22 for Aaron McLaren, but he really has kind of rediscovered himself at Marshak. And he was in the shadows of Dixon at Ganassi and the shadows of O'Ward at Aaron McLaren, but he's really been able to emerge and just put down a marker. at Meyershank, and he was. I mean, they got everything. They did everything perfectly. I mean, and this is something he said after the race, that they are another, like I said with Kirkwood, that are just executing on such a high level. Their strategies are right, and they were right to take the gamble on not stopping under that caution and go on that offensive strategy, whereas it was maybe for, say, Lundgaard, who was in front at that point, a bit more of a risk. Also, Marcus Armstrong, somehow, I'm not really sure how, coming home in fifth.
Well, this is Armstrong's fifth top 10 of the season, and I don't think I could quite explain to you how he got there in any of them. Apart from Detroit, we had that very lucky caution. The rest of them, I got no idea.
But again, very impressive. They are, I don't know, there's just this ability to just pick up results that defines some of the best teams, I would say. Like, Penske aren't having that this season, are they?
No, they're not. And yeah, they just execute very well. And I think Felix Rosas has executed very well and has been one of the most underappreciated drivers the last couple of seasons. But, he did tail off towards the end of last year. And I think that's going to be a telling sign this season. I mean, look, from Road America last year, which was round 8, he got one top 10 to the rest of the season. So that's one top 10 in 11 races. He did have an awful bout of bad luck. Let's get Felix's thoughts on that. We asked him about this exact topic and his reaction to that. And it was also very hot this weekend. So here's Felix Rosenqvist's preparations for the slightly warm weather. When you have a weekend where you're preparing for such temperatures and it's going to be hot, do you do anything different in your preparation? Do your plans pre-weekend change in anticipation for the heat?
Yes, I try to just, drink more, hydrate more, drink some salty stuff. Not too much, because then you wake up like 3 times every night and have to go pee. So you kind of try to keep that balance. You don't want to do any big exertion where you're sweating a lot right before. So you're probably 2 days out. You don't want to be doing a 2-hour bike ride or something like that. You just kind of keep it, in the AC if you can, and just, build up your reserves.
And obviously last season you had a really good start to the season with the team, and that's sort of very similar to what you've done so far this year. Obviously last year around this time you sort of had a more difficult time of things until the end of the season. So how do you prevent that from happening again this year?
Yeah, it's kind of been ironic in that way. It's been a little bit of copy-paste of last year so far. We had 2 kind of tough weekends after Indy, Detroit, and St. Louis, which, I think in general we've been quicker, though. We had more pace to show. Been pretty good, both qualifying and race. I'm not super worried about it. Just kind of, I think it's a tough time for everyone. The crews are working really hard. Just a lot of back-to-back stuff. Have an Iowa test coming up. So you want to keep that balance. You're just keeping everyone happy and sharp, not only drivers, but mechanics and engineers and stuff. And just balance that. I think it was a little learning lesson last year. So, but yeah, I think we're in good shape. We're still sitting P6, I think, in the standings. So, yeah, all to play for.
Okay, and the podium was rounded up by Santino Ferrucci. 4th top 5 in a row for Santino Ferrucci. He would actually be 7th in the standings if it wasn't for the points loss he had at Detroit. So he'd actually be ahead of all the Penske's if it wasn't for that, which is ironic. He actually jumps up to 9th in the standings, despite having an absolutely atrocious first 5 races of the year. In the last 4 races, him and the team have absolutely come to life. And the 4th top 5 in a row, he was on an even bigger fuel save than Palou, I think, was he? He had to do an extra lap than Palou did.
I mean, he was pretty much the same strategy as Dixon, so I'm not really sure how he made it work, to be quite honest.
And well, he did. Quite remarkable. All of Ferrucci's top 5s recently have been very, very different. But I mean, he stopped his car as soon as the race finished. It ran out of gas. And everyone knows, I don't really know how Ferrucci got there all race, but it's just having a good strategy gets you in the right place at the right time. Fair play to the 14 crew. And I think we have to give a lot of credit to Santino Ferrucci, because to pull off that strategy when somebody like Scott Dixon could have pulled off a very similar strategy, that is mightily, mightily, mightily impressive. So fair play to Santino Ferrucci, an excellent run of form, probably the best run of form in his IndyCar career. So a lot of credit to it. It says Ferrucci did 16 laps, so that's more than anybody else did. So fair play to Ferrucci.
So I was just looking at the Firestone data, actually, and I don't really know how he converged onto the lead strategy, but he did. He made his first and second stops at the exact same time as Palou, and then I think he did 1 lap fewer than Palou on his 3rd stint, fuel-wise. That was maybe decisive for Palou, really. He managed to run that extra lap, and Ferrucci had to run that 1 lap extra. But I'm not sure how he managed to get there, but clearly just had really, really strong race pace. Again, a bit like it was a theme last year. Qualifying wasn't great for Ferrucci. And here again, I mean, he started 18th, but they've been able to cut through the field. Even David Malukas, he caused the opening caution of the race by kind of just completely missing his braking, running a bit into the back of Christian Lundgaard and spinning off into the gravel. But he managed to recover back to 7th. But yeah, I mean, on Ferrucci, he obviously made these claims, we can win the championship. But also within that, he said, I think we'll be fighting for top 5s regularly. And obviously it took until May for them to, I guess Malukas said this as well. And I think there were a bit of some personnel shuffles in the team between the cars throughout the off-season that May was a chance for them all to really
centralised too during the off-season. Yeah,
it was a chance for them all to work really closely together. And that's clearly been, I think, really important to this turnaround. And yeah, he said they'll be regularly fighting for top 5s, and that's 4 successive top 5s, 2 podiums in that stretch, and a very cool finish to the race as he pulled over out of fuel and was thrown a beer by a fan and just chugged it. That was only an IndyCar, but that's brilliant. Imagine that in F1.
Yeah, that would never happen. But a big weekend for Richie because his car had a different livery this weekend to commemorate the life of Marty Sexton. He passed away in the last week or so. He was a big time supporter and friend of the team. So pretty good result for Ferrucci, that considered as well. Pretty emotional result for them. And he says she's looking down at them. So that's obviously a very nice touch for Ferrucci's podium as well. Now, we haven't touched on our unofficial third host of the podcast. He's not here this week because we decided to give him an off week after coming on every other week. But I think he's done enough to probably warrant himself coming back on next week. So sorry, Louis Foster, but you're doing too well to not have you back on every single week. So inevitably on again sometime soon. But similarly to last year, the unlikeliest of pole positions coming from a rookie. This time, as Foster obviously last year was Lundqvist. And well, first of all, Louis shaved his moustache post-weekend. We asked him about this a long time ago. Raised over £1,000 for $1,000, I should say, for charity, which is fantastic. And it obviously made him quicker, as noted by Álex Palou, because took a really surprise pole, was on the used res. Foster didn't think he had a chance, and executed it excellently. I mean, from that point forward, it's always going to be a bit difficult, but hey, he led laps, which is pretty cool. And you finished 11th in the end, which so close to our top 10. There's been a couple of occasions where Foster's been just on the verge of the top 10, but first British pole sitter in 13 years, and is 12 years, I should say, and is a British-based podcast. We are very pleased for our good friend Louis Foster.
And this is the longest track on the calendar, and I know obviously there's some long straights, but it's one of the hardest tracks at that length, obviously, to put together completely over the 4.014 miles, and it was a rookie that managed to do it, and it was the same chassis that crashed at Gateway only 6 days earlier. Was obviously essentially T-boned by Newgarden. They've had 2 massive rebuilds in a couple of races before this, so even for Foster just to finish and come home, joint career best 11th was really impressive. But to be up against Palou, who was like rattling through the reds to try and get pole, and do so on used tires is like, I think we can't overstate how impressive that is. And that's 2 rookie pole sitters in the first 9 races. Obviously with Schwartzman's wild miss at the 500, first time in 71 years, 1954. And I think, looking wider season, this is Foster preserving a 100% record of advancing to the Fast 12 at least on road courses in qualifying, 4 from 4. He obviously qualified 3rd on the Indy road course, and obviously going 2 better here. I mean, almost very reminiscent of Lundgaard in a way, which I think would indicate this is the start of something pretty cool. It's actually Dario Franchitti contributed a lot to Foster's the donation for Foster to have his mustache shaved by none other than Will Buxton, and it was Dario who was the last Brit on pole.
The only 2 people from Odium, as Will Buxton would make us believe, shaving his moustache off. Yep,
but yeah, it was Dario on the pole in May 2013 at Sonoma. So yeah, I mean, I quite like Foster's approach immediately after getting that pole. He was like, he was clearly shocked, and it hadn't quite sunk in, but immediately his attention turned to like, okay, race day is most important because they've had really good pace this season, and RLL are obviously showing really well on road courses. Graham Rahal made the Fast Six, and that's 3 successive road or street courses that he's made the Fast Six now, I believe, because obviously he had Indy GP was on the front row and then made it in Detroit before his grid penalty. So that's pretty cool. Just not quite had the execution in races. And I mean, the first lap was really impressive. He fended off quite a lot of pressure before that caution came out. Then clearly got shuffled back a bit, as you would expect. He's not got experience of, I mean, he has experience recently of leading races in Indy Next, but not of doing so in IndyCar. And yeah, maybe looks to be lacking a bit of top speed, possibly. I think that was an issue that Rahal had as well. And yeah, I think they lost a few spots in the first pit stop, and from there they just continued to get shuffled back a little bit on restarts. But to salvage 11th, I thought was pretty good. But yeah, I mean, super happy for Louis, and I don't know, is it a surprise? I mean, we know how good.
Come on, don't go around saying Foster and Pole's not a surprise.
I was going to say, in the respect that RLL are just, I mean, they're again the only team with 2 cars in the Fast
They seem
Six.
to qualify incredibly on road and street courses, but just cannot execute it.
Yeah, but it is like I said this, and I'll just echo it again. It's very, very much like what we saw from Lundgaard, I feel like, and that's what Foster's come in to fill that void, and he's doing a pretty good job at it. And he's just got to get those race results over the line. I think that's kind of a team-wide thing as well. Incredible! What a remarkable story in a season where, okay, we've had only 2 race winners, but I feel like we've had some pretty cool storylines.
Okay, let's go over the running order as quickly as we can. We'll start off with Palou, Rosenqvist and Ferrucci, your podium, with Kirkwood and Armstrong running out your top 5. Kevin Simpson in P6. Out of Damon Lucas, bit of a crazy day. Obviously spun himself around in lap 1, trying to avoid Christian Lundgaard. Got a penalty later on for avoidable contact, which drops in 3 positions, but still ended up a 7th. So pretty good performance. And again, it's another top 10 for AJ Foyt Racing. So they are on a really hot streak now on both cars, which is obviously superb. We've got Nolan Siegel in 8th. Scott Dixon ended up in 9th. He obviously was leading the strategy most of the day. He's
5th in points.
I don't know how to rate Dixon's weekend, because I don't think it was actually a very good weekend from Dixon, to be honest.
Go on.
What's your argument here?
My argument here, I mean, he did make the Fast 12, which I feel like we haven't seen that much this year. He seems to have really liked that.
Well, Dixon hasn't qualified well in years.
Yeah, but he's been particularly poor this year. But he did make the Fast 12 before. Yeah, I think it was just a bit of a sloppy block on Di Francesco. Essentially, that got him sent down to the back of the field. And I mean, Dixon's already in a point, as with pretty much everyone not named Álex Palou and Kyle Kirkwood, and to an extent Pato O'Ward, where you're just going Hail Mary, and especially starting 25th, that's sometimes an ominous sign when you have Scott Dixon starting back in 25th. And they clearly just went, they rolled the dice, and yeah, they were just a bit short on fuel. But few laps of caution, and we could be talking about Dixon winning this race, which again would have, I mean, he was the only one that made that. I mean, I think Rossi had to bail a couple of laps earlier on a similar strategy. So again, Dixon is one of the only, maybe other than Palou, drivers that could even come close to making the strategy he tried work. And yeah, just didn't get the yellows he needed. But I don't think it was that bad a weekend. But
It wasn't a good weekend, though, was it?
No, it wasn't a good weekend. No, I mean, it's been I don't know.
Dixon, how many weekends this year would you say Dixon has had a good weekend? St. Petersburg, good weekend.
Not since St. Pete, really. But he's 5th in points because it's such a weird season.
Well, because Dixon can pick up top 10s out of nowhere.
But like Dixon being 155 points behind his teammate, I'd still say he's had a pretty poor season. Everyone has,
apart from maybe Kirkwood, Palou, and Rosenqvist.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that Lundgaard now, he was the guy who looked like, he's going to be Palou's challenger, but he's had such a scruffy run of races, obviously made this error trying to pass Herta this week, and he's down in 6th now, 158 points back and behind Rosenqvist and Dixon. I don't think it was a bad weekend from Dixon, but we're kind of at this point already at the midpoint in the season where drivers aren't even looking championship. They're just looking at, like, we'll just do whatever we can and take all the risks we can to try and get race wins. And if
nobody's doing that. Which is the crazy.
Well, no, because no one can beat Palou. Because no one can beat Palou. He's that good. It's ridiculous.
So we got 25 people. We'll ignore Kirkwood, who are just going all out to win a race, and none of them can win a race.
Because this is just like, again, it's just something else to outline just how obscene what Palou is doing is. And Kirkwood. And Kirkwood's having such a good season, but it's just going to be completely overshadowed.
Next week, we're going to have to give our driver of the season so far, and we're going to have to have a driver of the season so far who isn't named Álex Palou or Carl Kirkwood, because it would be a very good podcast episode otherwise.
Yeah, stay tuned for that next week, mid-season review. I always love doing that episode.
10th place was your good friend Arenas VK, who was the other week who was picking up penalties for absolutely everything. There was somebody, there's somebody a few races ago, I can't remember who it was. There was somebody a few races ago who got an absurd amount of penalties. Anyways, Arenas VK's day to day to do that. He got a penalty for jumping the restart, so he had to restart at the back of the field, and then he got a drive-through for service a bit before green conditions. That was
because he was supposed to serve the penalty sent to the back of the field, but because I didn't really understand it, but because he pitted, that was then escalated to a drive-through.
Then he got another penalty for avoidable contact.
I think that was when he hit the back of Rahal.
So, and he ended up 10th. So one of those, right strategy.
But we're seeing this. We are seeing this. I feel like every week from VK. I mean, there's like they're still not like totally solved qualifying. I feel like Dale Coyne. They'll have some weeks where VK is like just incredible and he's on the brink of the fast 12, and other weekends where they just don't really have the pace. But every race they seem to have the pace. VK is 14th in points. I mean, Detroit, he was running in the top 10 and had to retire because of an engine issue. And Indy had his brake issue. That's 2 non-finishes. And he's still 14th in points for a team that had 2 cars not even close to making the leaders' circle last year. 5 top 10s in 9 races. When, as we've said so much, their best finish last year was 13th Coyne. It's incredible. It's really, really incredible what VK is doing.
Archie, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we do still have the finishing order to do the Fast 6 Predictor Tournament and the Podium Predictor Tournament. Knowing you at VK, I think we might be here for a while. So
I just want to say how
I'll cut you off. I'll cut you off.
Do you agree? Do you agree?
I can't say that publicly, can I? I can't say it on
privately.
This podcast.
You're going to say it privately, so thank you. That's what that is.
Louis Foss was 11th out of McLaughlin. Alexander Rossi had to bail out of his Dixon S strategy.
He had an awful weekend, by the way, Rossi. And they the recovery in the race was very impressive because he was having, I think, second practice. He was having a nightmare. They were just well off it. So good result in the end.
We had Power 14th, Ilott 15th. Good qualifying though. Qualified 9th. So Prema continue to make small strides towards good progress, which is great.
Yeah, that was good. That was their first transfer on a road and street course. I think he was 4th in his group actually as he transferred. So nice effort.
Colton Hurd is 16th. Just another strange. This is one of his best tracks, and he just seems nowhere. This Colton Hurd. So obviously he had his kerfuffle with Lundgaard, but I mean he's been completely outshone by Kirkwood week in week out, and the pace he's spoken about he's had all season didn't have this weekend. So
I felt like there was such gaggles of cars on track at points where it actually felt like he was up there with some of the lead guys, and I mean he finished only a few places behind McLaughlin, which maybe suggests, okay, did he get caught out by the same yellow as McLaughlin? And if they'd got lucky, maybe Herta would have finished better. I just don't understand how he finished 16th, and qualifying was really poor as well.
Yeah, he's only got 4 top 10s all season. 17th was O'Warder, had Rasmussen, Di Francesco, and Rahal. Marcus Ericsson. The last car who was running without any major issues, and every single week you just feel like when it can't get worse for Ericsson, it gets worse for him. And he's now 21st in standings. The only people behind him are Schwartzman. Well, the 3 rookies, Rob, Di Francesco, and Ilott. So
yeah, I mean the only kind of positive thing from the weekend is that he qualified 14th, and I think qualifying 14th isn't that impressive at all when you've got Kirkwood shining as he is. And
he out-qualified Herta.
Yeah, but I mean he was 20th, 21st in practice, and it was probably fittingly finished 21st in the race.
I mean, Dennis Hauger came 2nd in Indy next, so
yeah. Well, I mean,
weekend, but
we will talk about this next week, I think.
But I think we will. But every week you feel like, well, he can't get any worse this week, and it's not like Ericsson's having inherent problems. It just feels like he's just slow, which is not the Ericsson we're used to. Anyway, Conor Daly, he obviously crashed all by himself midway through. Jacob Abel had yet again according to his Instagram, another really terrible luck of fortune. So
yeah, I really feel for him. He had damage. I mean, he was actually running quite well. He'd recovered really nicely. He was running in that kind of mid-pack gaggle. I think he was on a pretty decent strategy, but then I think he had some damage, and then he lost power. I mean, it's something every weekend for him. I mean, we'll get him on back on the podcast at some point, and we can get the full lowdown. But God, poor guy.
Yeah, Christian Lundgaard obviously had his spin late on Newgarden, who crashed by himself. Rob, who had his own accident when trying to overtake David Malukas. Boom!
Yeah, that was. We need to give context for that. But Townsend Bell, as Will Buxton's just calling the crash, Townsend Bell offers real insight. But the first thing he says is, boom! It was a bad crash. It was quite a big crash. I mean, he looked like he was. I mean, he just completely misjudged his braking behind Armstrong.
I found it very amusing that Townsend waited until he hit the tyre barrier to just remember boom.
After he'd already really had about 2 other hard hits with the concrete before the tyre barrier, which was, I mean, he scrubbed quite a decent amount of speed there. But that was a big accident.
And then we ended up with Robert Schwartzman, who had his own accident.
I got to say, that feels like the first time we've seen a mistake from Schwartzman. I don't actually feel like he's made that many mistakes, which is to his credit.
I mean, Indy 500 pit lane we deemed wasn't his fault.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, maybe that was. I know it was a brake failure. Maybe that was something his doing in some way. But yeah, he's still ahead of Foster in Rookie of the Year. I know, obviously, that's owing to Foster having a few incidents. But 2 points clear. I mean, Yeah, I mean, I still think that's Foster's to lose. Ultimately, just quicker than Schwartzman and Prema, but. Yeah, it's been a clean season from Schwartzman to that point, more or less.
Right, unsung hero, a lot to choose from this week. I'm going to fire off of Kiffin Simpson. Now, I know he probably got lucky in a strategy, but what I will say about Kiffin Simpson this season in comparison to last season is I feel like there's a few circumstances where if he was in a good position, he still probably wouldn't have got a good result. But I now feel like he's getting in these positions and still getting a result, which I feel like he maybe wouldn't have done last season. So.
Yeah, I mean, I echo all of that. I'll go for something different. I mean, over the course of the season, we could almost rename this the Renus VK Award. I'll go for someone different this week. I'll go for Marcus Armstrong. I think just generally, season as a whole, I know he's not really that close to Rosenqvist as such, but I think he's just had a quietly pretty good season, and this was a result that kind of sums all of that up. Also, I think David Malukas' drive as well deserves a bit of attention as well.
I've only taken it away because it was his own error, which cost him.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Armstrong for me.
So, top 3 drivers of the weekend is actually, again, probably very, very open this weekend. Also, there's a lot of people you could probably give this to, in fairness. Yeah, I don't even know where to start. Very difficult one, actually. I think Palou's got to be number 1 because I can't think of anybody who had a better weekend than Palou.
Yeah, I've got mine.
Okay, will you list yours off?
I'll go for Palou, Rosenqvist, and Foster.
Okay, because I was probably going to go for Palou, Kirkwood, or Rosenqvist. Would probably be my 3. I think Kirkwood qualified well, and he actually probably got a bit unlucky. I mean, he probably could have got podium if he didn't get in those instances of Power and Lundgaard and Rosenqvist, obviously. Actually, no, I'm going to replace Rosenqvist with Ferrucci because I think Ferrucci's fuel save is actually going under the radar quite a lot.
That's also fair because it doesn't look like there's any obvious thing that happened that was lucky. He genuinely just did all of that on merit. So that's also fair. I think, him and from mine as well.
I'm actually going to Palou, Ferrucci, Kirkwood. I think, I haven't given Ferrucci enough credit for that because, I mean, everyone's raving about Palou doing 15 laps. Ferrucci did a lap longer than that. So
okay, so we've got a bit of difference this week. That's nice.
Funny moments. I think there's actually loads to pick from this week. Again, we're getting a little streak of these, having loads and loads and loads. Ferrucci shotgunning the beer straight after the race was absolutely fantastic. Did like that. All the cars stopping in the exit of pit road was absolutely hilarious.
That was amazing.
The checker flag fell. Daly driving around half a lap with the toe still attached, which the AMR safety team used.
Yeah, he sprouted a tail. He sprouted a tail. I mean, that could have been bad if it kind of snapped the other way. But yeah, I don't think he got a penalty for that. Deservedly.
That was very amusing, though. Just to have it wagging around the tail. I did think Townsend Bell's boom.
That was funny.
Absolutely hilarious.
I also think Álex Palou just carrying around a red Solo Cup everywhere he went all weekend. I thought that was just really funny. And also on the cooldown that they played the song over the PA at the track, which I think that's I don't know. I think maybe the fuel graveyard takes the cake, or Ferrucci chugging the beer. Actually, to be fair, might be the one.
I found boom so funny.
Yeah.
The way he waited for him to hit the barrier before saying it. That was so funny. And W.D. Francesco gave a bottle of wine to the cameraman that you brake checked last week.
Oh, that was good. That was a nice touch.
That was amusing. Right, we better move on to our predicted tournament. Last week, we both went for Palou, Power, McLaughlin, Herta. You went for Aaron McLaren's. I went for Maya Shanks last week, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Didn't fare out too well because, I mean, I got Palou and I got McLaughlin, as did you, but you also got Lundgaard. So you open up an extra points gap there. We'll move on to the podium predictor tournament. So we'll start off with the fans who went for Herta, Palou, and Power. So that is 2. You went for Palou, Power, Armstrong.
And this hurts because the day after I'd put this prediction in, I was speaking to Dan and I said something about Rosenqvist getting a podium because I was convinced I'd put him, which was frustrating. I was convinced I put him third. That would have been 2 extra points for me. I don't think Armstrong was a bad shout in the end. I mean, he only finished 2 places behind, and I had the vision that Amaya Shankar would finish on the podium, just the wrong one. I was debating it for ages who to put, and I went for the more rogue one. And it didn't pay off. I hope I don't have to pay for that at the end of the year.
I went similar because I went for Palou, Power, and Herta, I believe, was who I went for. So I got 3 as well. Ivan, I think it's going to be a theme here. Palou's going to top everything. Ivan went for Palou, McLaughlin, and Herta. So that's another Palou victory guess, which gets him 3 points. Morgan went for Palou, McLaughlin, Lingard. So that's another Palou guess, which gets 3 points. So if you're not predicting Palou or Kirkwood to win at the minute, respectfully, what are you doing? What are you doing? Tom put Kirkwood, Newgarden, and Herta, but not putting Palou on a road course, I think, is shameful behaviour. You're not going to win anything like that if you're not putting Palou on a road course. And James went for Kirkwood, McLaughlin, Palou. So he gets 1. So the points as they run, you lead me by 2. And then there's a bit of a gap to Tom, who's on 21. He's 3 points behind me. And then Morgan's on 19. And then the rest are on 15 and 14. So a bit of a Kirkwood Palou rivalry brewing here, apart from one of us has another monstrous gap. So that's the only difference there. IndyCar dropped new chassis this week. We all sort of knew it was coming, but it was officially confirmed to happen in 2028, which is effectively it's been delayed a year, as we all sort of knew was coming. I also thinking of methods to stop Palou's dominance, so I'll give him that until he somehow finds a hack to make this car even better. But it's long overdue. The DW12 would have been in usage for 16 years, which is quite simply unbelievable. But moving forward to the new car, they've said the aim is to enhance overall raceability. They're trying to reduce the weight by 85 and £100 compared to the current chassis, which is already quite light, as far as I know. They're planning for a 2.4 litre twin turbocharged V6 combustion engine, which is expected to provide more torque and power over the current engine formula. So those are the 2 main things. Hybrid will evolve with the new car in development, which I think is needed. They should have really come at the same time, but we won't get into that can of worms. But finally, confirmation that the DW12 is finally going to be put in a care home somewhere and we can leave it be after 16 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the delay is a bit frustrating. I feel like they should have started work on this a lot earlier, but at the same time, like, I'd rather them push it to 28 than rush it for 27, obviously. They said they're starting testing, start of 26, and that's right. They really have to get moving soon now. Clearly, stuff has been going on in the background. We can't be having delays like there was with the hybrid when that was supposed to come and then didn't come and then was delayed again. And I feel like the 85 to 100 pounds lighter, that's not even 40 kilograms lighter, which I feel like it's not that much lighter, really. Given the overall weight of the car, you would feel like that's kind of a little bit negligible. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not speaking from an expert's point of view there. I believe the 2.4 litre twin turbocharged V6 is something that both Honda and Chevrolet have. The manufacturers are TBC at this point for 28, but obviously with a lot of rumours about Honda leaving and the fact that hybridization obviously is staying as well, maybe that's a point that they could be staying on board. I don't know. We'll get answers to that, and we'll also get the first kind of renderings as well at some point in the near future. I mean, the hybrid was never going to go away. I think, as you say, Dan, like the hope is it's going to be better integrated with a car that's built to fit the hybrid. Essentially, the more power, that's good, because the biggest demand from the drivers was that the car is lighter and more powerful. So that's good. There's going to be a new look, as they say, but also with the staples of an Indy car, which I guess is good because that balances innovation with not veering too far.
But the main goal, I think, for Dallara is a car needs to flip into a barrier at 400 miles an hour and still come out unscathed. That's the goal. It's almost there. They're almost there, but they're not quite there yet.
Yep. But yeah, I like the fact that they obviously said that they're going to keep with like staples of an IndyCar, because drivers have said, and kind of agree, like you don't want to go too far with something that could really damage the racing product, which I know it's obviously been damaged a bit by the hybrid, but as Road America showed, the racing product is still really good, or can be really good. And obviously, if you're better integrated the hybrid, the car's a bit lighter, then hopefully return to what it was. On your safety point, Dan, they've said they're going to further bolster that again. Obviously, that's a really key point, because almost most important, I would say, because the DW12, the integrity of that car it's saved lives, and that's more important than anything, that the car is safe. On that safety front, the aero screen is going to be integrated, because obviously it was retrofitted to the DW12 in 2020, so that's an interesting point as well. And yeah, just glad to finally have this project getting going, because 16 years with the same chassis is not great. We need to keep up with modern trends, and it seems like IndyCar's finally doing that. You need that bit of a refresh.
But anyway, we'll leave it there. And next week is one of my favourite episodes of the year, because we head straight into our mid-season review, recapping everything that we've about the season so far, key storyline, give us out some mini awards halfway through the season, and then we'll preview the last 8 races of 2025, which comprises of many short ovals, some road courses, some street courses, maybe a championship final. Maybe I'm stretching here, but we'll discuss that all next week. But we'll leave it this time for Road America. As always, thanks very much for watching, thanks very much for listening. And what I will also say is, if you're a fan of other motorsports, we have just introduced some new podcasts for NASCAR. If you're a fan of NASCAR, we've obviously got existing podcasts on Formula E and Formula 1. If you're a fan of the series of both, go and check them all out. They're all on Spotify, available to find. But for this time, thanks very much for watching, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.